Hello everyone, and thanks for hanging out with us for the Behind the Numbers weekly listen and eMarketer podcast made possible by VTEX. This is the Friday show that reviews the most planet-obliterating media news stories of the week. I'm your host, Marcus Johnson. In today's show, digital habit myths.
As the population gets older, the people who enter the 65 and over demographic are going to be coming from a place where they're more used to these types of e-commerce behaviors.
Is travel reaching pre-pandemic levels?
It's still kind of confusing to figure out where you can go, exactly what test you need to have, or what your vaccination status might need to be, and the documents to prove that.
Will conversational commerce take online shopping by storm?
You know, we don't have a WeChat, and WhatsApp is more popular in Europe, but I think eventually this will come to the US in a big way.
Social audio gets some big partners. Creators have never been so popular. And what if companies were mini countries? All right, folks, joining me for this episode, we have three people. We introduce them now. Let's start with our principal analyst who covers TV and video. It's Paul Verna.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, chap. Thanks for hanging out. We're also joined by our retail and e-commerce analyst. It's Blake Droesch.
Hey, everyone. Good to be here.
Hey, fella. And finally, we have Peter Vahle, who is one of our forecasting analysts.
Hey, thanks for having me, Marcus.
Hello, sir. Hello, sirs. So, today's episode, as usual, we have four segments. Story of the week, digital habit myths. We start there. We then move to the game of the week. Our three contestants will go head to head to give us the best takeaways they can from each of the four stories to win the championship belt. We then move to questions answered. It's where we answer the questions you email in to us. And finally, dinner party data is where we talk about things we've randomly learned, completely unrelated to our jobs. So, let's start with story of the week. It's where we always begin. Digital habit myths. What are we talking about here? Well, Shira Overday of the New York Times recently wrote that only some of us are riding Peloton bikes and ordering food via app, but this can still disrupt everything. She then goes on to list some numbers that show that we might have a warped view of the popularity of some habits, but also that even small changes in our collective behavior can have huge ripple effects. She notes a couple of things, couple of numbers, four of them for you. The first one is that Americans spend about 2/3 of their TV time watching conventional TV. 2/3. That's compared to just 6% of the time they spend watching Netflix. And number two, online shopping accounts for less than 14% of all the stuff that Americans buy. The rest of it, 86%, is being bought in stores. Number three, remote work is a hot topic these days, but only 1 in 6 US employees are working that way. And number four, about 6% of Americans order from the most popular restaurant delivery apps in the US. So despite the headlines that we often read about, a lot of these behaviors, whether it's Netflix, online shopping, remote work, or ordering through restaurant delivery apps, a lot of people don't do those types of activities. So I asked the guys what they think are some of the biggest digital habit myths. Paul, we'll start with you. What did you come up with? What do you think people believe is true but isn't actually the case?
Well, I'm going to pick up on that Netflix stat and TV viewing in general. I think there's a perception that TV is kind of a dying industry. Ad spending is flatlining. People spend less time on TV, and a lot of what people watch is on-demand streaming services, all of which is true. But I think what that feeds is this perception that, you know, I hear a lot of people saying, oh, I don't watch TV, but then they have a laptop on which they watch pretty much, you know, they binge Netflix shows, or they even binge, you know, regular TV shows. So I guess my bottom line is that TV content, visual media, is more popular than ever, despite the statistics about traditional TV, which would suggest otherwise.
So what you're saying there is TV as the device.
Yeah, I think people conflate maybe the device with the activity or the type of content.
Should there be a shift in definition? I was speaking to Eric Hagstrom, one of our senior forecasting analysts, about this, and talking about OTT, linear TV, and regular cable TV, CTV. Should we stop thinking about it the way it's delivered and more about TV, the device where people spend a lot of their time consuming video?
Absolutely. I think we do focus more on the delivery or the distribution type and not so much the content. That said, if you call it TV, then people will think back to traditional TV as opposed to these other forms of TV. So maybe a new acronym or a new term is in order, but my track record in coming up with these terms has been horrific. So every time I've tried to generate interest around a different, type or a new term to try to define how people are doing something, it's backfired horribly, and I'm very traumatized about it. I can hardly even talk about it. So let's just move on, please.
I want to spend the rest of the episode talking about that, to be honest. But let's get somebody else in here quick. Blake, how about you? What myth do you think exists out there in the world?
Well, something that always surprises me about our digital buyers forecast is that the way that our forecasting team tracks it is it looks at ages 14 and over in the US. So anybody who ages 14 and over who makes at least one purchase via any digital channel during the calendar year. So this doesn't just look at regular digital buyers. This looks at everyone with a minimum criteria of one purchase per year. And with that said, this year, we're only forecasting that 75.5% of the population is going to be considered a digital buyer. So even though that's the overwhelming majority of the US population, the fact that you've got, close to 25%, a quarter, who won't make any purchase online whatsoever is still pretty shocking to me when, especially, post-pandemic, when the entire narrative in e-commerce is this massive shift that was driven by the pandemic out of necessity. The fact that even coming out of that, we have a pretty sizable chunk of the population, as you can imagine, mostly the 65 and older crowd that are not buying anything online, any product whatsoever, is certainly something that stands out when I look at our forecasts in this area.
Do we know why we only count people if they've bought something once per year as opposed to a frequency that's maybe once a month, once a week, something like that?
The rationale is that we want to be inclusive of buyers of all categories, and there are plenty of categories that people aren't likely to purchase monthly, like furniture or consumer electronics. We wouldn't want to exclude these buyers from our digital buyer number since they are potential customers to e-commerce retailers.
I think that's quite interesting. So, but Blake, so when you're thinking about frequency of purchase, what to you would make sense there? Once a year seems like not very frequent at all. When you think about people buying things online, is once a month where you would see it, once a week perhaps? I feel like people are getting Amazon deliveries every day. You could maybe do once a day.
I mean, I think you're right. I think that there's certainly also a very large segment of the population who makes multiple purchases probably per week online and is spending a much more significant chunk of their annual retail spend online as opposed to in store. But this is also it's counterweighted by groups of people who prefer to do all of their shopping in stores and maybe are making a purchase or two online annually for certain types of products. But it is something that's really interesting. And I actually do plan on writing a report in the fall about digital buyers by demographic. So we'll be digging deeper into it, and we'll hopefully come up with some more thorough explanations as to why and what different demographics are purchasing online versus in store.
Right. And of that 25% that you mentioned, how many more of those do you see actually becoming online shoppers in the near future? And is there a main one or two reasons that you think that they're abstaining from buying things online?
I think it's basically has to do with older generations. I mean, if we look at the digital buyer penetration by age, you've got, of course, probably no surprise that the 25 to 34-year-olds this year, we're going to have 88.9% of them. So almost 90% of 25 to 34-year-olds are going to be digital buyers, whereas the 65 and over crowd, that's only just over 56%. So it really has a lot to do with age. There I would imagine, and that, this is something that we hope to dive into, that geographic location is actually playing a factor. You probably have folks who are living in more urban areas where an e-commerce fulfillment infrastructure was put into place, enabling faster shipping quicker than some rural areas where it might be, a 20-minute drive to the Walmart, but the behavior is people are already used to going to, a big box retailer every so often and stocking up on what they need. So sort of piecemealing different products on Amazon and getting it the next day is something that might not be sort of what they're used to. And as e-commerce and shipping availability begins to expand, I think it is something that could change behavior gradually, but I believe that probably the long-term increase in digital buyers is going to be a lot more reliant on, just as the population gets older, the people who enter the 65 and over demographic are going to be coming from a place where they're more used to these types of e-commerce behaviors.
Yeah. Peter, how about you, mate? What do you think's the biggest digital habit myth?
So the myth that I want to talk about is that Amazon dominates retail, period. I don't think that that's true, although they certainly do dominate the e-commerce space right now. I believe we just published an article that said that they're bigger than the next 9 e-commerce retailers combined in terms of e-commerce sales. So they dominate e-commerce, but looking at the overall retail landscape, Walmart makes significantly more money from selling things than Amazon does. And most of Walmart sales, of course, come from in-person sales at their physical brick and mortar stores. But looking at 2020 revenues, Walmart brought in $524 billion compared to Amazon's $386 billion. So there's quite a big gap looking at overall retail sales there. And I think just to back up for a second, because I think part of the reason that sort of everyone talks about Amazon only is that a lot of the people in, the e-commerce advertising media research world are based in urban areas. Sort of they're working in cities, and often Walmarts aren't sort of the way you shop there, and it kind of gets pushed to the back of the mind and nobody talks about it. Whereas Amazon not only is huge in e-commerce, but it also is such an interesting technology company to constantly keep itself in the headlines. So
yeah, that's a good one. And so looking at even just the online share, I mean, Walmart, even though it is a ways behind, it's 6 times smaller than Amazon in terms of retail e-commerce sales share. So Amazon 41%, Walmart 7%, so 6 times smaller. It is second place. It is nearly twice as large as third place eBay. And Walmart has been making strides, basically gaining about a percentage share each year since 2018, 4%, 5%, 6%, and then 7% this year in 2021. Some interesting ones, gents. I want to talk quickly about why these myths exist. Shira over there explains that there are probably 2 reasons why we sometimes believe that behavioral changes from new technologies are far more commonplace than they really are. She points to number 1, people and journalists tend to pay more attention to what's new and novel. She notes that expensive exercise bike maker Peloton has about 2 million customers paying to use its exercise bicycles or treadmills. For comparison, nearly double 3.5 million US households had birds as pets during a recent year. So nearly twice as many US households have birds as pets as customers pay to use Peloton, as according to the veterinary trade group. And number 2, second reason that some of these myths become into existence is because the digital butterfly effect. A zillion little changes can be unpredictable and uneven. She notes that in a recent New York Times article about New York's economic recovery from the pandemic, a stat noted that if just 1 out of 10 Manhattan office workers, 1 out of 10, stopped coming in most of the time, that would translate into over 100,000 people a day not picking up a coffee and a bagel on their way to work or a drink afterwards. So she says, imagine what that might do to sales for a bar in Times Square, or maybe how much that might help a bar, a restaurant in the suburbs. So even though some of these things are small, they can have a rather oversized effect once you scale them up. Yes, today's novelties can become tomorrow's commonplace, she notes. So yeah, some good ones there, gents. That's all we've got time for digital habit myths and the story of the week. It's time now for the game of the week, but first a quick word from our sponsor, VTEX. Retail's next competitive threat may come from a business model or channel that didn't even exist a few months ago. This modern dynamic requires companies to adapt quickly, pivoting business seemingly overnight, something traditional commerce platforms just can't support. There's a new enterprise commerce platform on the rise, one that's fast, flexible, and doesn't require 9 months and $1 million to get up and running. Go to vtex.com/eMarketer to learn more. Folks, we are back. It's time now for the game of the week. Today's game, what's the point? The part of the show where we read out 4 stories and have our contestants, Paul, Peter, and Blake, tell us what they think is the main takeaway of the story. Okay answers get 1 point, good answers get 2, and that we just won on penalties feeling answers get 3 points. I wouldn't know what that feels like, but I've heard it's nice. Each person gets 20 seconds to answer before they hear that bell. Whoever has the most points after 4 rounds wins and gets the last word. No, I don't want to talk about England right now. Blake already made jokes about it before we started recording. Let's just move on. Okay. Congratulations to Italy. They were the better team. They were indeed. They deserved it. Good job, Italy. Maybe a World Cup for us. I'm of course kidding. There's no way we're going to win that.
What was the slogan you guys were all saying? Bringing it home to Rome? To Rome?
Football's coming home is the song. Football's coming home
to Rome.
So Italy, that was Italy's.
No, Italy made a parody of England's slogan.
Yeah, we say football's coming home as in the trophy is finally coming home to England after 55 very painful years, and Italy decided this is not very nice. Italy, okay, I'm trying to be a good sportsman, and you made this joke up about bringing it home to Rome, which is exactly where the trophy went. But yeah, that's what they were.
All roads lead to Rome.
Unfortunately so. Especially ones with trophies. All right, let's start the game. We'll start with Paul, top of my screen. Travel reaching pre-pandemic levels is the first story. 64% of folks said they planned to travel domestically this summer, 64%. That's just a fraction more than the 63% who said they traveled at least once during an average pre-pandemic summer, notes Morning Consult in May of this year. Paul, travel reaching pre-pandemic levels, what's the point?
Well, I think the point is that this is definitely a time of recovery, but there's still too many structural aspects of travel that are not, sort of back in full swing. A lot of restaurants and hotels are understaffed. Many of them had to close permanently. A lot of people are still kind of battered by, the economic effects of the pandemic. And also, a lot of people and companies were not really able to make plans in time for the kind of usual, summer peak. So I think what we're going to see, though, is that next year, things really will start getting back more to normal. I know that our forecast doesn't go out to 2022, so we haven't put a stake in the ground yet as far as what's going to happen next year. But my prediction is that next year will be significantly bigger than this year.
Blake.
Yeah, I think despite the numbers, sort of leveling off, it doesn't really paint a full picture at all in terms of where we are with travel, because the behavior of travel has still been is still impacting U.S. travelers for many reasons, mostly being the fact that there are a lot of places where travel is still restricted. So you're probably getting a lot of areas, especially domestically, that are seeing maybe even heightened travel than they've seen before, but certainly a lot of places where Americans would travel internationally that are still very low. And the fact that unfortunately, still with the new strains of COVID and the varying levels of vaccinations throughout the world, I think travel behavior can still sort of change on a dime. So I think I agree with Paul is that we're not going to see any true normalcy until hopefully at the earliest next year.
Peter.
Yeah, Marcus, I think one of the key words when you introduced this topic was that domestic travel is sort of really coming back this summer, and it's, people are traveling again locally. But internationally, I think it's a very different picture. To piggyback on something Paul said, people didn't have time to plan. There's, leading up to the summer and fall, this spring, there was still so much uncertainty. People still really weren't vaccinated by and large. So I think the rest of this year is going to be still a lot of domestic travel, a lot of local travel, because when you look internationally or you look sort of, outside of the US, it's still kind of confusing to figure out where you can go, exactly what test you need to have or what your vaccination status might need to be and the documents to prove that, and I think those elements of complexity turn off a lot of people. And you're like, if I'm just going to hop in the car or hop on an hour flight, that's a whole lot easier and there's no risk involved.
Yeah. I mean, I was planning to travel to England, but I totally switched plans and now I'm going to go to Italy instead.
Oh,
it's a good choice.
When will it end? When will it end? It's probably a good choice.
It will end when England
Pretty
wins
miserable,
something finally. So maybe in another 55 years.
Okay, great. So never. Just say never, Paul, next time. 70% of the US population estimated to be vaccinated by August 10th, according to the New York Times. Airlines did get $54 billion in federal aid to help them restart operations, largely by holding on to airline employees during the pandemic. Nina Getson points out that for marketers, two things. One, discounts matter, especially as prices rise. 56% of US adults said they were likely to book a vacation if they got a discount at a hotel. It's from an April and Week Morning Consult survey. And number two, focus on local, as Peter was emphasizing, domestic travel definitely is going to be a big deal. And finally, travel industry digital ad spend going to grow 15% this year, but it will still be 30% below pre-pandemic levels. We move to our second story. We start with Blake. Will conversational commerce take online shopping by storm? A recent Economist article notes that companies have been using messaging apps for customer service. Now they want to get people to buy stuff via chat, the way hundreds of millions of Chinese people do on the super app WeChat. The piece notes that every day, 175 million people send a message to WhatsApp business accounts. They're the channels designed for companies. Mark Laurie, who was in charge of Walmart's online shopping efforts, says a lot of business messaging has humans in the loop. But he thinks AI, artificial intelligence, will be able to answer customers' requests as fuzzy as, for example, get me a birthday toy for a 5-year-old around science education for roughly $40, suggesting choices and completing the transaction in seconds is what he thinks AI might soon be able to do. So, Blake, will conversational commerce take online shopping by storm? What's the point?
I'm weary of this because a lot of it relies on the fact that it's so popular in China to use WeChat in order to make purchases, but we don't really have an app that is as centralized in the US as WeChat is in China, where users can do everything from browsing the internet to chatting to getting a car as we would with Uber. And I think until we have something that an infrastructure that's built around a messaging app in the US where it's a little bit more dynamic, I don't necessarily see US users bringing in a browsing or a shopping component into where they're having their private conversations, unless it can be something that's a little bit more expansive and all-encompassing, like a WeChat is.
Peter.
In Europe, I know WhatsApp has become a really popular place for commerce and for businesses to sort of offer deals, promote deals, and sell things through their WhatsApp business page. But compared to the US, WhatsApp is way more popular in Europe. So yeah, to Blake's point, there isn't one chat app that everyone uses that would be very obvious for conversational commerce to take off. It does seem like Facebook is trying to lay the groundwork to be that place because they own WhatsApp and they're integrating their messaging between Instagram and the Facebook Blue app. So that seems like they're in a position where they could really start to try to replicate some of the stuff that is happening in Europe. And then, like Blake mentioned, WeChat in China. I think the conversational commerce title is a little misleading because I think that for now, a lot of it, or what we would say is messaging commerce in the US, is really like a bit of contacting the company and then the final order might take place rather than anything substantially different.
Paul.
Well, when I think back to how platforms that are now synonymous with advertising and marketing, like YouTube and Facebook, in their early histories were, the brands really didn't participate almost at all. And there was a lot of head scratching about how those platforms are going to incorporate brand marketing. And now that's ubiquitous across those platforms and many other social platforms. So I kind of make a leap and think that messaging is another area where brands will increasingly find a voice, and there's a very short distance between brand marketing and enabling commerce at the, click of a button. So I think it will happen. I do get the point that in the US, we don't have a WeChat, and WhatsApp is more popular in Europe, but I think eventually this will come to the US in a big way.
Okay, I don't know why I bothered saying at the beginning 20-second answers, gents. It's been a minute-long answer each, and that's why it's a yellow for everybody. Yellow, yellow, yellow. 3 yellow cards have been issued at the halfway mark, but they're great answers, so you can't hate that. 2 points from me. Robert Bennett, CEO of Rehab, which is an agency that helps brands reach consumers digitally, says that now companies should tread lightly since chat apps are emotional spaces full of family and friends. And also, The Economist was noting conversational commerce works so well in Asia and Latin America, in part because cell service isn't as strong and lower cost smartphones put e-commerce and company-specific apps out of reach for many. Move to our third story. We start with Peter. Social audio gets some big partners. The NFL will host 20 live social audio events on Twitter Spaces during the 2021 season, becoming Twitter's first sports partner. The rooms will feature current and former NFL players hosting conversations to discuss the season's matchups. Twitter will also run game highlight videos as part of the deal. The NFL has previously worked with Clubhouse during draft week. The two continue to work with each other on future programming. Clubhouse have also recently signed a deal with the NHL to host rooms around the Stanley Cup. And Ashley Carman of The Verge recently noted that Clubhouse has partnered with TED to bring exclusive chats to the platform this summer and beyond. TED, obviously TED Talks. Peter, social audio gets some big partners. What's the point?
Yeah, I read the news about the NFL and I thought RIP Clubhouse. And then I read the news about TED and I thought maybe it's still breathing a little bit. But focusing on the NFL part, this feels like the biggest blow to Clubhouse yet, that they had sort of the deal with the NFL and the NFL jumped ship pretty quickly. And I think this goes to show what we've been saying for a while about social audio, that it will succeed as a complementary aspect of a platform or service. So with Twitter, where you can already have a ton of conversations about the NFL and you can show clips of NFL games, that has a huge advantage. And why wouldn't the NFL want to go to a place where there's a ton of more content and conversation around it?
Paul.
I agree with Peter that it's more about social audio as a phenomenon than about the platforms that may deliver it. I think it's definitely here to stay because, let's face it, people want to weigh in, especially in a forum that does not have a 20-second limit. And I think I got that in under 20 seconds.
So many shots fired. I don't know what to do with myself. Blake, go on.
Yeah, I think that these partnerships are going to be able to get some users onto these platforms or these facets of platforms, but the social audio audience is so small and fragmented right now that I don't think any of these partnerships are really big enough to move the needle to one platform or another.
Boom.
Nice and short, right?
That was, finally. Only took you 2 years. Twitter.
Thanks for not giving me a second yellow on that. I probably deserved one.
It was close, man. It was pretty, you can see me contemplating.
Red
it was
card
pretty
would be
close,
at first,
my friend.
wouldn't it?
If orange existed, you would have got the orange. Twitter has partnered with the NFL on other initiatives since 2013, so they do have a long-standing relationship. Jacob Kastronakis of The Verge was noting that. And also, interestingly, the two have confirmed that under the deal, TED is free to sell brand partnerships or ads. If it's interested, and Clubhouse won't take a cut. We move to our final round. We'll start with Paul. Creators have never been so popular. Mike Isaac and Taylor Lorenz of the New York Times write that Facebook is trying to court creators, but they might be too late since creators have already flocked to rival platforms like YouTube and TikTok. That's because they invested in digital tools for influencers much earlier and gave them ways to earn money. But Facebook is certainly trying. Last month, Facebook hosted a Creator Week to celebrate influencers and is offering monthly paid subscriptions to influencer pages and the ability to post ads in short form videos and live streams. Facebook has also promised not to take a cut of creators' earnings on the platform until at least 2023. Insider Intelligence analyst Nina Getson also notes that Amazon wants in on the creator economy, evidenced by their 40 active creator-related job postings as of May 2021, according to some data from ThinkNum cited by The Information. She points to 3 areas. Number 1, Amazon's creator-focused initiatives, including Amazon's influencer program, where folks can host live streams. Number 2, Amazon looking to hire a VP of creators at owned property Twitch. Number 3, Amazon reportedly looking for an influencer marketing manager of its streaming service within Prime Video. So, Paul, creators have never been so popular. What's the point?
3 things. Number 1, if Facebook can get back its mojo in the creator economy, it will be through Instagram and not the flagship platform. Thought number 2, never bet against Facebook co-opting things that work better for other companies. And number 3, never bet against Amazon for anything.
Blake.
I think a lot of the data that we see coming from where consumers follow influencers and where influencers are most active, Instagram is still, by and large, one of the top platforms for this type of content. So I totally agree with Paul. With Amazon, they were one of the first e-commerce retailers to have an influencer or an affiliate program. They've had an influencer program since at least 2017. It's nothing new, but I think they're repositioning their strategy for Amazon Live and other entities to be platforms for influencer activity and not just a place where influencers operate on social media to drive conversions through Amazon. So it's a shifting of their strategy within the influencer space and not necessarily them wanting to get into it initially, because they're already still very much ingrained in affiliate marketing and influencer marketing and have been for a while.
Peter.
Yeah, this race to get the most talent and the best talent just continues among all of these social platforms and now beyond to the Amazons and elsewhere. And I think really it's because it's proven to be an amazing business model where you don't really have to pay them too much, or maybe you pay your top creators, but really people promote to your site and everyone else watches it. And that's a pretty good deal for the platform.
All right, that's the end of the game of the week. Time now to reveal the winner. Drum roll. Paul is this week's winner of the game of the week. Congratulations to Paul. He wins. Peter came in second, but you did nearly get a second yellow, so you got lost some points because of that. And Blake, you stood no chance because when we joined the video call, he opened with Buongiorno.
And it was worth it.
We did not care for that. It was pretty funny. Paul, congratulations to you, sir. You win the game of the week. What do you want to do with your 20 seconds of fame?
I will say the following.
Okay.
Don't believe the hype. The people have the power. I like it like that. And music lovers have probably recognized those as lyrics by Public Enemy, Patti Smith, and Cardi B, respectively. And poetry lovers might have noted that that was a haiku.
Paul.
All right, so Paul knew he was going to win because that was very well. It's a very well prepared
I just came
statement.
up with that on the spot. I was shocked that I won,
I
and
wasn't
I just
expecting to win. I didn't have anything
pulled it out of
prepared.
thin
Let me
air.
read this list.
Paul's like the guy who wins the Oscar and he's like tries to act surprised and then he
Yep.
pulls out the speech with like, that's like a
He's
5-minute
got it
long.
memorized. That's me.
Congratulations to Paul. He wins this week's game of the week. We move now to questions answered. The part of the show where we answer the questions that you've emailed into us. We don't have any questions this week, but we've got 2 emails. One is from Tayo from Ohio, long-time listener. Thanks again for emailing in, my friend. He says, I rarely miss a weekly listen episode, but it happens on occasion. I was working through my backlog of episodes, and last week, this was from a few weeks ago, so a few weeks now, you were the only one who had heard of Yahtzee. I don't believe it. I refuse to. Finally, someone else. I think they were playing a prank on you, a very mean prank. They all know good and well what Yahtzee is, have played it, and grew up loving it, like the rest of civilized society. This is a less solidarity with Marcus email and more of a, come on people, email. Yahtzee was the best thing ever growing up, right up there with Big Wheels. The nerve. Couldn't agree more, mate.
So who was on the show that day, Marcus?
I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to mention their names again.
I knew
Blake was
of
one of them?
Yahtzee because of like the cultural reference of people screaming Yahtzee when certain things happen, but I've never played it before and I don't really understand what that means when someone says Yahtzee.
Sarah thought it was Boggle.
That's right.
And I think it was Nina. She had no idea what was going on. It was a disaster. Paul, you must have heard of Yahtzee.
Oh,
Come
yeah.
on.
Yep.
Help me out.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I grew
Peter?
up. I grew
You
up
too.
playing
I
Yahtzee.
think I played it. Yeah.
Yes. I knew you guys would. All right. Finally. And big wheels as well. Love a good big wheel. I did have to look that up because I wasn't sure what they're actually called, but it's like those little like tricycle things that you ride as a kid with a massive front wheel and two little ones.
Oh, you call those big
Remember
wheels?
those?
Tricycle?
I don't. Tame Mateo called it big wheels. I had to look up what it was. If it was socially acceptable, that's how I would get to work. They're so cool.
You'd be a little too low to the ground, I think. Yeah, I don't know if you want to be that close to the pavement in New York City.
No way.
Yeah.
No one would see me. I would get annihilated. Anyway, one more from Mark. This is Mark Dolliver, Weekly Listener Hall of Famer, former principal analyst. He said, I just want to chime in on the controversy about Benjamin from California. So the conspiracy here is that there's a pseudonym, Benjamin from California, that Mark is going under to compliment himself now that he's off the show. So the question is Benjamin from California a real person, or is it Mark messing with us? So that's the controversy. So he says, on the controversy about Benjamin from California, whose kind remarks I much appreciated when I retired a few months ago. He is absolutely a real person and not a false identity I concocted for the sake of surreptitiously praising myself. Of course, Marcus, and this is insane, you'll have noticed that the phrase Benjamin from California is an anagram for a firm I ran email con job. But that's pure coincidence, he says. It is actually an anagram for that very phrase. A firm I ran email con job, Benjamin from California.
I wonder if Mark came up with that on the spot or if he had to rehearse it as well.
It's bloody genius. Now, I didn't think it. I thought Benjamin was a real person. Now I have no idea. Who knows?
The plot thickens.
It's a con job. Definitely a con job.
It's probably Mark.
Stay tuned.
Podcast at eMarketer.com if you want to say hi, send us in any thoughts, feelings, questions. Podcast at eMarketer.com. We move now to dinner party data. This is the part of the show where we tell you the most interesting thing that we've recently learned. We start with Paul because he won. Paul, what you got for us?
Well, I know you've all been waiting for this data point to come through this year. The U.S. Postal Service reported on the number of dog attacks that happen on their postal workers in different cities around the U.S. And the city with
They track this?
Of course. You didn't know?
Of course. What do you mean, of course?
They do track this. And the honor for the city with the most incidents in, I believe it's 2020, was Houston, Texas. However, what I think is the most important statistic here is not the number of incidents, but the number of incidents per capita, right? And in that sense, the winner is, drum roll please, Cleveland, Ohio. Now, so if anyone lives in Cleveland who's listening, but, we feel your pain. And if you don't live in Cleveland, but you have friends there, just please think twice before you send them anything in the mail.
I wonder how many of these attacks were, I saw the dog and I thought, I can make it. I can make it to the post box. Because by and large, aren't the post boxes at like the end of people's drives? As opposed to like you have to... A lot
of people have mail slots where you have to go right up to the house and...
Oh, they do have that?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Because I did a paper round when I was a kid, my first job, and I had to go up to every door and like put the thing in. Whereas in the States, every movie I watch, the kids just chucking it wherever it goes.
That is true.
I was so jealous.
That is true about newspapers, but not about postal delivery. And I think...
Maybe they should just do that. Then they wouldn't have to...
Yeah, they should just
throw your mail all over the lawn.
Perfect for porch pirates because now they can add junk mail in addition to, consumer electronics from Amazon to their loot. But yeah, I think a lot of postal delivery workers probably do make it like the daily challenge. Yeah, I'm going to make a run for it. But obviously a lot of them, get bitten literally and figuratively.
Goodness.
This is great justification for those videos and compilations on YouTube of like disrespectful package tosses when people are delivering stuff, and it's like, how like disrespectful can you be dropping this off and throw a fastball against the side of the house? But I mean, Paul, when you explain that data, can you blame them?
Disrespectful. Definitely look up that later. Peter, what you got for us, mate?
All right, what do I have here? So a YouGov study, and this is all the way from back in 2019. And it's how often people clean their cell phones. And 21% of people said daily. which I don't know
Daily?
anyone who does that. 20% said about once a week, a few times a month. 12% of people said a few times a month, 11% once a month, and then 19% said less than once a month. Only 8% said never. So 92% of people clean their phones.
I wonder how many said once a year, and do we consider them cell phone cleaners?
Yeah. I'll get back to you on the definition. But
It wasn't till you said that, and I thought, yeah, I should probably clean my phone, especially how much you handle it, and you take it everywhere you go. Never thought about it.
yeah, and that's why this survey being from 2019 is relevant, because now post-pandemic, I mean, I'm sure that daily number is a whole lot higher than 21%. I went from a never clean the phone to clean it occasionally, a Clorox wipe on the back of it. So I would be really interested to see how this has shifted, because I'm sure it's been a big change.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
Very good.
I definitely, I would never clean my phone unless it was like noticeably dirty. And then once, the pandemic started, I started wiping it down, and I'm still doing it just because, when you do think about where, you take your phone literally everywhere, like touching
Shocking
a subway
places.
pole, go right to your hand, back and forth. It's like basically an extension of your hand at this point. So
Yeah.
every time you wash your hands, you should probably be cleaning your phone.
This is like a plug
think
for
a-
Clorox here.
Yeah, I think also a lot of mail carriers in Cleveland are stopping to clean their phones and getting attacked. That's really what's going on here.
So use the code behind the numbers for 20% off on your next Clorox.
Please, no one use that code. You'll get nothing. Blake, what you got for us?
So this is some new data that just came out from NPD Bookscan that tracks US book sales. And surprisingly, I think, book sales are something that we generally view as stagnant. So sort of in the overall theme of the show, I wanted to share some hopeful news that print sales finished 2020 up 8.2% over 2019, which is pretty strong performance. And I'm sure you could attribute a lot of that to maybe folks spending more time at home during the pandemic, maybe taking up reading again. But in the first half of 2021, actually, the print sales of books jumped 18.5% again in the first 6 months compared to the first 6 months of 2020, which included the beginning of the pandemic. So it's interesting. I think there's been a lot of chatter in the publishing world, given these really promising numbers, that the publishing industry, 3-4 years ago, maybe presumed to be a dying industry. There was a lot of talk of publishing adopting a streaming-like model like the music business had. But I think what we're now seeing a lot of criticism of the ways in which Spotify, Apple Music, and the likes are paying royalties to the artists. It's possible that, print book sales and the publishing industry have maybe made the right decision by choosing not to adapt this, streaming digital format. And it's, it's starting to show that sales and interests in purchasing print books are actually still popular.
I've always thought that bookstores should adopt a subscription model. So I would pay like $10 a month to go to something like The Strand or Barnes & Noble or whatever and take out like 3, but basically the library model.
Yeah, I was going to say, I have some good news for you. There are these things called libraries.
The reason people don't go to libraries and go and buy books is because they don't have the most the latest stuff. But imagine if you could pay $10 a month and get out like up to 3 books, or maybe you pay $12 and you get up to 5 books. Maybe there's like a $10 a month subscription or like $20 a month subscription, and you can like access like book readings. I think that'd be pretty cool.
That would be cool. But I would say that if you go to a large library and request a new book, I think most of the time they will get it for you. And that actually really helps the writers, because if they do, if you go to a library and request books, if they get enough of those, then it does encourage the libraries to purchase the books.
Are they getting it for you just so that the belligerent man screaming that he wants Harry Potter will leave the premises? Or are they getting it for you because that's company like the policy? Like, are you going into libraries and going, "Where's Harry Potter?" And they're like, "Just get him the copy so he gets out of here." Or is that like legitimately what happens?
No, I mean, I think that it serves the interest of the library because they
that's really a thing that happens.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, they want people
maybe
to
you were just going in and making unreasonable requests.
So they keep getting funding.
All right, just checking.
But they've got Harry Potter, so don't worry about it. There's no
goodness.
shortage of Harry Potter, believe me.
I've read none of them. Okay, if you're still listening after that comment that I haven't read any Harry Potter books, I've got two for you. One is, if companies were countries, so it's hard to comprehend somehow just how large some big companies are, but a recent study by MacKeeper took the market cap of multiple tech giants and compared them with the annual GDP of countries. I've done this once or twice in a few other episodes with a company or two, but here's some more for you. So if companies were countries, Apple would be the 8th largest country in the world, ahead of Italy in 9th. Microsoft would be in 10th, ahead of Brazil. Amazon and Alphabet would be 15th and 16th, ahead of South Korea. And Facebook will be the 22nd largest country in the world. Put another way, if Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Alphabet, and Facebook joined forces, they would be the 3rd largest country on the planet. There would be more than 50% the size of China, which is in 2nd place, and more than 1/3 the size of the US in 1st.
I think the biggest takeaway from this is that if Apple would actually be bigger than Italy, then maybe next time England could lose to Apple on penalties.
Oh, for crying out loud. I did not see that one back for. I thought this one's I'd be fine with. Nope. Still
it's
a joke.
Always going to come back to haunt you, Marcus.
Marcus, you literally said Italy in it.
I know, but I thought maybe we were past it. I thought maybe we were past it, guys. Such a shame. Final one I got for you is there are only 18 minutes of action in the average baseball game. Baseball, all about building suspense, but if the pace seems slow to you, it's because there are only 18 minutes of actual action in the average 3-hour game, according to the Wall Street Journal. That means 90% of your time at the stadium is spent waiting for something to happen. Or eating. What do you mean spent waiting for something to happen? Crowning my face with hot dogs. What's everyone else doing? That's low. That made me never want to go see baseball again in person.
Yeah, but what do you think the NFL is? I mean, a football game could be even less. Probably a little more, but it's significant amount of time is in between plays.
Yeah, I've seen those stats. I don't remember off the top of my head, but football games are remarkably low in terms of the amount of action compared to the clock.
That's why everyone should watch basketball. Never watching football again. Soccer again. Sorry, I'm in England now, so I say it the other way. That's what we've got time for today's episode. Thank you so much to my guests. Thank you to Blake, kind of.
Ciao.
Right at the end. Thank you, Peter.
Goodbye.
No, don't you dare. Don't even think about it. No more Italian words. Thank you to Paul, winner of the Game of the Week.
I would never say arrivederci, so I'll just say thank you.
Goodness.
Always a pleasure.
Why did I even show up for this episode? Thank you to Victoria, who probably wants to say something in Italian, but we can move on really quickly so she can't. Thank you to everyone listening. If you want to offer any of your condolences to me and the England team, you can send them in to podcast@eMarketer.com. If you're Italian, don't you send me anything. I'll see you guys on Monday, hopefully, for the Behind the Numbers Daily. And I'm of course kidding. Send them in. I love you all. We'll hopefully see you guys on Monday for the Behind the Numbers Daily, the eMarketer podcast made possible by VTEX. Happiest of weekends. Unless you're English, you won't be able to.